Welcome to Life Stories. Sometimes, the people we expect to welcome us with open arms turn out to be the ones who hurt us the most. What happens when a woman travels across the country for her sister's wedding, only to be humiliated and asked to leave by the groom's family? How will she find the strength to stand up for herself and reclaim her place? This is a story about love, resilience, and the power of knowing your worth. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. Let's dive into the story. I had traveled halfway across the country to be here. The long hours on the plane. The restless nights filled with anticipation. All of it had led up to this moment, standing at the entrance of a grand wedding venue. My heart pounding with excitement. It was my sister Sophie's wedding day. And despite everything we had been through, I had never felt prouder. Sophie and I had been inseparable since childhood. When our father left, and our mother worked tirelessly to support us, I had taken on the role of both an older sister and a guardian. I sacrificed my youth to ensure Sophie had a future, working late nights so she could study, saving every penny for her education. Watching her grow into the confident, ambitious woman she had become made every hardship worthwhile. But as I stepped inside the venue, a sinking feeling settled in my chest. Something was off. The guests, elegantly dressed, exuded an air of sophistication that made me feel like an outsider. My simple yet carefully chosen dress suddenly felt inadequate. My presence almost intrusive. I brushed off the unease, reminding myself that I was here for Sophie, not for the approval of strangers. Then, it happened. "You shouldn't be here," a voice sneered from the side. I turned to see Daniel's younger brother, Eric, standing with his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice measured but firm. "You heard me. Your presence is ruining the mood of this event. Just leave." His tone was dripping with disdain. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. But then I saw Daniel's father approaching, his expression even colder. "You were not invited by our family," he said bluntly. "We expected you to understand that." My breath caught in my throat. I had received an invitation. Sophie had made sure of it. But standing there, under their condescending gazes, I suddenly felt foolish. "I traveled a long way to be here," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the lump forming in my throat. "And now you can travel back," Daniel's father said with a wave of his hand, as if dismissing a servant. "You don't belong here. Having you here is ruining everything." His words cut deeper than I expected. I had faced rejection before. But this was different. This was Sophie's wedding. A day that was supposed to be about love, family, and unity. And yet, here I was, being cast out as if I was an embarrassment. For a brief moment, I considered fighting back, demanding to see my sister. But what would that accomplish? Their minds were set. And so, with quiet dignity, I nodded. "I understand." I murmured, "I'll leave." Turning on my heels, I walked out, each step heavier than the last. The moment I stepped outside, the cool evening air hit my face. But it did little to soothe the sting of humiliation. I pulled out my phone and dialed Matthew's number. "Hey," his voice came through almost immediately. "What's going on? Why are you calling me from outside?" I swallowed hard. I was asked to leave. A pause. Then, his voice darkened. "What do you mean? Asked to leave?" I could picture his expression. The way his jaw would tighten when he was upset. The protective instinct kicking in. But I didn't have the strength to explain it all. "I just wasn't welcome," I said simply. "Where are you now?" he asked, already sounding like he was moving. "Outside," I replied. "Stay right there," he said, his tone firm. "I'm coming." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I had spent my whole life fighting for a place in the world, proving that I was capable, that I was worthy of respect. And yet, in one evening, A few cruel words had managed to make me feel like the lost little girl I had once been. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let them win. Not today. Not ever. I stood outside the grand venue. My arms wrapped around myself as if I could hold together the broken pieces of my dignity. The golden lights from inside flickered against the dark sky, mocking the warmth and joy I was supposed to be part of. A wedding was a celebration of love, of unity, yet here I was, alone, cast aside like an unwanted guest. It wasn't long before I heard hurried footsteps approaching. I turned just as Matthew came into view, his sharp blue eyes scanning my face, immediately registering my distress. He was still in his crisp suit, his presence commanding even in the dimly lit street. "Emma," he said, his voice softer now, but laced with concern. "Tell me what happened." I looked away, unsure of how to say it without sounding pathetic. "They don't want me here," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. His brows furrowed. "Who?" "Daniel's family," I admitted. "They told me to leave. Said I wasn't invited by them. That I was ruining everything just by being here." I expected Matthew to curse under his breath, to shake his head in disbelief. But instead, his expression turned unreadable, his hands clenching at his sides as he processed my words. "They said that." His voice was low, dangerously controlled. I nodded. "His father. His brother." Matthew inhaled deeply, then exhaled through his nose, a telltale sign that he was restraining his temper. "Come with me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Matthew." "I don't think." I didn't ask, he cut me off gently but firmly. "You are Sophie's sister. You belong here more than anyone else." Despite the warmth of his words, I hesitated. The humiliation still burned in my chest, and I wasn't sure I could endure more of it. But as I looked at Matthew, I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up for myself, for everything I had worked for the years of sacrifice that had led to this day. With a slow nod, I took his hand, allowing him to lead me back inside. The moment we stepped into the grand ballroom, the shift in atmosphere was palpable. The murmur of elegant conversation, the soft clinking of glasses, everything seemed to pause as Matthew guided me with unwavering confidence. Heads turned, eyes followed. And then we reached Daniel's family. His father stiffened at the sight of us, his mouth pressing into a thin line. Eric, the younger brother, scoffed under his breath, as if amused by my return. "Matthew," Daniel's father greeted, forcing a smile. "We weren't expecting you." "No," Matthew said coolly, his grip on my hand tightening. "But you should have expected Emma." A flicker of discomfort crossed the older man's face. "There must be some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Matthew interrupted. His voice was calm, but his presence alone made them shrink back. "I heard everything. You insulted my wife." His words struck like lightning, the weight of them echoing in the silence that followed. The realization dawned on Daniel's family: Emma wasn't just an inconvenience, a nameless outsider they could dismiss. She was Matthew's wife. And Matthew wasn't just a guest. He was one of the most influential business partners they had. "Look," Daniel's father started, his voice faltering. "We didn't mean." "Then what did you mean?" Matthew asked, his tone unrelenting. A tense silence followed. No one dared to speak. And for the first time that evening, I felt something shift. The power dynamic had changed. I wasn't just the girl they tried to push away. I was the woman who belonged. The weight of the silence lingered, heavy and thick. Daniel's family exchanged uneasy glances, their arrogance now replaced by hesitation. They had miscalculated, underestimated me, underestimated Matthew. But I had nothing left to prove. I had spent my entire life fighting to be seen, to be respected. And in that moment, I realized I no longer needed their validation. I had my sister. I had Matthew. And I had built a life I was proud of. No cruel words could take that away from me. Without another glance at them, I turned toward the reception hall. My head held high. The music swelled in the background, the laughter of guests filling the space. Sophie was there, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw me. She rushed forward, throwing her arms around me. "I was looking for you," she exclaimed. "What happened?" I smiled, shaking my head. "Nothing that matters anymore." Matthew stood beside me, his hand resting protectively on my back. Daniel soon joined us, an apologetic look in his eyes. He wasn't his father, nor was he his brother. He had chosen my sister, and I believed he would do right by her. The wedding continued, a celebration of love, resilience, and new beginnings. And though I knew there would always be people who looked down on me, who thought I wasn't enough, I had found my place. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I had claimed it for myself. Later that night, as Matthew and I left hand in hand, he leaned in and whispered, "You never have to face anything alone again." And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I never would. Subscribe to Life Stories for more heartfelt stories like this. See you in the next video.